Welcome, dear viewers, to a new episode of Dialogue Horizon. In this episode, we will continue on the same issue of the speedy changing events in the country, the political arena, without seeing any beam of hope on the horizon. So we'll continue to discuss the newly coming events. That's why I think we are happy to host two of our distinguished guests. First, we have our professor, he's known to most of you, Professor Manzoor Abdullah Manzoor. He's professor in the University of Khartoum, and he used to be the director of the Peace Institute, Peace Research Institute, and he is very active and actually very needed by the international organization in the area, in his domain of the conflicts and resolution of conflicts and crises. Actually, this is where he is specialized. Welcome, Professor Manzoor Abdullah Manzoor, to be with me in this episode.
Thank you.
Also, we have our friend Dr. Abdul Halim Taiman. Abdul Halim Taiman also, we hosted him many times, and he is a political activist, and he is the assistant chairman or president of Ummah Party. Welcome, Dr. Halim.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let us first start, Professor Manzoor, with the recent event which occurred last Sunday in Juba, where the ratification of the matrices or the matrix of the implementation of the agreement which was signed on October 2020 in Juba. And in this, as you remember, the agreement, it is only the change of the model, the way or the implementation procedure, so that it can be easily implemented. But as you remember, the agreement itself is included. One of the most important articles of the agreement is the repatriation of the people and the resettlement of those who are displaced, internally displaced from their homeland, and now they are residing in camps. The other thing is also to see the peace in the different areas, especially in Darfur and the east, and also they want to make sure that steps for granting, which was stipulated in the same agreement, that to grant Blue Nile and South Kordofan self-autonomy, a kind of some special system in the whole federal system of the country. Plus the other aspects of the agreement. People, they say that the only thing which was implemented is the power sharing, which is the easiest, and it is casting a very bad shadow, as if these people, they are just wanted to go for power, and they neglected this for almost more than 2 years. Now, my question is, the same hurdles which stopped the implementation since October 2020 are still existing. What can you see from this new matrix timetable or for the implementation? Because the same hurdles, the same impediments for the implementation of the original agreement is still prevailing and even worsening. Well, how can you see this?
Well, thank you very much, Omar. I think I look at what happened in Juba as somehow a response to the workshop that was organized by the signatories of the framework agreement on the same issue.
Yes.
We recall that a couple of weeks ago, those who the trilateral mechanism plus FFC at least, yes, they organized a 3 days workshop on the Juba peace agreement. I attended part of it. I attended, as a matter of fact, 2 of the sessions. I was discussant for 2 papers there. And surprisingly, the government of South Sudan did not take part in that. To be very frank, the government of South Sudan refused to take part in that workshop.
So it was absent.
So what happened in Juba, to me, or at least the way I see it, is a response to that workshop, and to me this is not good, not a good sign.
Not a good sign.
It's not a good sign. And I totally agree with you that the objective conditions that led to the delay in the implementation of the Juba Peace Agreement did not change. They were there.
Still there.
It is still there. And I'm really surprised why this Juba workshop has to be done almost 3 years after the agreement. There should have been an M&E plan in place, monitoring evaluation system, so that, for instance, every 3 months or let us say every 6 months, there should be a review.
Yes.
To see what happened, what didn't happen, and why things are not moving. You see? So, and for these reasons, I really have a lot of doubts about the usefulness of what happened in Juba. Because if you did not change the conditions that led to the impeding of the implementation of the agreement, there is no point in introducing new matrices.
We should not expect any development.
Precisely.
As long as the premises is still the same.
Precisely. And then let us also not forget the fact that what happened in Juba 3 years ago was precisely what has been happening during the Engas regime. Signing peace agreements only to abrogate them. Signing peace agreements only to have those who sign them get power positions.
To be privileged.
Exactly. And unfortunately, this is what is happening now. We have been saying in this episode time and time again that the key critically important aspect of these agreements, which is the security arrangements, was not done the way it should have been done. You see? And if you are unable to implement the key critical aspect of the security arrangements, you cannot have IDPs and refugees repatriated to their places.
Definitely.
Because security is not in place.
Yeah.
See? So, unfortunately, what I can say about what happened in Juba is just another episode of political bickering. Nothing more than that. I don't think any matrices would be of use given the conditions we are having.
That's very clear. Dr. Hari, what can you say about bearing in mind that also a very important figure was absent or made to be absent in the new workshop for the agreement, which is Hemiti. Hemiti was the signatory of the original agreement, but this time he was not there. Plus, the presence of UNITAMS also, she spoke, the representative of UNITAMS spoke about trying to get and to avail the funds, because most of the things, they depend on the funds. And now Professor Manzoor is saying that the most important issue or article or chapter of the agreement is the security arrangements. Without security arrangements, we cannot do anything. Without money, you cannot do anything. What is new that will make this workshop on these modalities or this matrix give some positive results? Is there anything that can give positive results?
I think, Doctor, as he said, we should not rely on rearranging the time framework of the documents, but rather addressing the exact challenges. First of all, Juba peace agreement lacks the political will in order to implement it. This is first. And the second thing, that after the signing of the Juba agreement, we expected that the mechanisms of implementation should be there. Who are the observers? Is there any team that is concerned with following up? This is another thing. The other issue, according to the agreement, the forces that should be responsible for taking the responsibility of security in Darfur should be formed in 90 days' time. Until now, they didn't form this force. So this is there's no room to blame the FFC or the international community, because this is something that should be done between the military component and the peace parts. The other challenge is the economical challenge, because the implementation of this agreement needs a lot of funds.
Yes.
who will pay this fund? Given in mind that by these people, by lining by the side of the military and supporting the coup, they have put this obstacle by themselves in front of the peace agreement. Given in mind that there's also another obstacle because Abdulaziz al-Hilu and Abdul Wahid Muhammad Noor, still they did not sign the peace agreement. So the peace is incomplete in this sense. Also, there is a very important remark in Darfur. Not only these are the armed groups, there are many armed groups not included in this agreement, although they went to Juba at that time and they asked to be part of the agreement, but because they are less powerful at that time, the mediators, they refused to include them. They are still in Darfur, some of them are in Libya, and they are scattered in a wide area between Central Africa and to Libya. This is also endangers and puts the agreement at risk. So in addition to the public support to the Juba agreement is deteriorating, and because these people supported the coup, now the public, especially in Darfur, they are not supporting these leaders at this time. All these issues are, this new matrix has nothing to do with these challenges. So this is not, if you have such challenges, so do you think that changing the matrix will address all these issues? Completely no. So these are the basic issues. I think, as Victor said, peace agreement should begin with the priorities, resettlement, and providing security. And we saw how the killing in Darfur has increased after the implementation of the peace agreement. We saw how the security deteriorated in most part of Darfur after the signing of the agreement, even in a way that's even worse than before. And we have seen also the internal tribal conflicts, and the disintegration between the components of these regions has also increased. So peace agreement should begin with these priorities. Should first give security to these people, should return the refugees, and should address the issue of those displaced people, and at last they should talk about power sharing. But you cannot, you cannot give, for example, privilege to a layer of leaders and give them posts, and that is all. Peace should not begin with that, and should not be looked as a compensation for the leaders.
Yes.
Peace should reflect on those people who are suffering and those who are really hardly affected by the war. These people still are eager to see the peace translates into their daily life. The workshop that is held by FFC was a chance, because there are more than 560 participants from all these areas. And it was a chance for those who previously, their voices are not heard. At last, people, they attended the workshop, and people hear their voices and hear their opinions. And I think this is one of the advantages of the workshop. So still, we need this peace agreement to look at the priorities and not to return to the old fashion to give power and positions to the top leaders.
So thank you. So you both agree that something very important, that the priorities were not held. They started the other way around. They started by the power sharing, which gives a very bad impression that as if the leaders are just looking after posts and positions, neglecting the hardships and the agony of those on the ground.
Absolutely, and one of the drawbacks on what happened in Juba just a couple of days back was the fact that the review completely ignored the stakeholders.
stakeholders.
Absolutely. You know, people who were the main subject of the agreement were not there at all.
This is very bad, sad.
So what are you talking about?
This is very bad.
Yeah.
Okay, Professor, we go to another issue in the arena for both of you, actually. It was last week, the very controversial statement or speech given by General Hemeti. In that speech, first of all, he said he's condemning actually the coup of 25th of October, and he also talked about that he's openly aligning with the framework agreement, that is to say, aligning with the FFC for the Freedom and Change, the Central Council, which is exactly on the opposite side of those who went to Juba last week, which is the Democratic Bloc. So some people, they think that Hemeti, after this fiery speech or statement, he should have resigned or do something more than just sending messages like this. So, but those who are also otherwise, they are thinking or afraid or afraid of a split, a real split between the rapid forces and the army, or confrontation, deadly confrontation, which will be a catastrophe to the country, which will lead definitely to a very short civil war in my mind, followed by intervention, complete intervention from outside. Can you elaborate on this, on Hamid's stand and speech, and why he sent it at this time?
Well, I think we need to put things in perspective.
Yes.
My personal reading was that what Hemeti said was actually a response to what Burhan said a week earlier. We all recall that Burhan in Zakiab, when he went to this marriage ceremony, out of the blue, he said that the condition for us to go ahead with the framework agreement is to integrate the SRF in the Sudanese army. And to me, as a Sudanese citizen and observer, I was really surprised, because there was no need whatsoever for that statement, because this was already something that was agreed on. It was in the framework agreement. Yeah. So there is no reason that you say this statement, you know, okay. not at least in that, you know, open air. This is one. Two, Hemeti's support for the framework agreement is not siding with FFC. I don't see it that way. This is a support for the process that would lead us to be on the right track in transition, which will eventually lead to us having fair and transparent elections. So it's not correct to see that Hemeti is siding with the FFC one. No, Hemeti is siding with the process, the only viable process facilitated by the trilateral that would take us a step forward in the transition. That is how
you read it, how you see it.
That is how I see it. And however we may say about what Hemeti said, to me, it takes a lot of guts to admit your mistakes. And there is no one in his right mind who would say that the October 25th coup of 2021 was not a mistake. It was a horrible mistake. It took us, you know, many steps back. We lost everything. We lost the support of the international community. Everybody condemned it. The African Union suspended Sudan's membership. That is very clear. So Hemeti was not bringing anything new in that statement. He said this actually, I think a year or so, I think it's in December last year. He said it, that we failed.
We failed. He said we failed.
Even Burhan himself, indirectly, admitted that, you know, we did not succeed. So, but the problem was that to have this kind of statements by military leaders in the air, that is quite serious.
Very serious.
Civilians, it's okay, they disagree, they fight, they don't have guns. But these people have guns. And that is what makes such statements very serious, very dangerous, and they might actually impede the process that is now being facilitated by the trilateral. And my last point here is that the rapid support forces, I don't look at them as a militias, because this is also something that we need to correct. This is not this is a regular army They have their own law. They're not a militia.
Yeah.
And this is this a regular force. It is being paid by the taxpayers' money. Their budget is part of the budget of the country.
And by law, and they
And
establish
by law,
they
exactly.
Yes.
So we have to put things in perspective. So we have to call a spade, and eventually, as stated in the framework agreement, the SRF would be part of the Sudanese army, because this is something that everybody calls for.
in the Sudanese army. But he also admitted
Of
in
course,
his speech,
he said it. He said it very clearly. And actually, I
integration.
attended the inauguration of the final political, settlement.
the framework.
When he made that speech on the 8th of January, he said this precisely, that we are looking for a unified professional Sudanese army. So I don't see why this issue is now becoming a bone of contention between the army and the rebel support forces. Something is not in its place.
Something must be clear, yes. Why, I don't know. Because it is included, everybody is now convinced that the RSF, the rapid forces, should be part of the army. The way, this is something technical, highly
Precisely.
technical, it has to be done by the army technical staff or
True.
strategic staff.
True.
What can you add, Dr. Halim Teban, to your comments about the speech, the controversial speech of General Hemeti at this time when things are boiling, which gave the impression that the gap is widening between the two generals, Burhan and Hemeti, which is not a good sign to us as nationals and to the international community as well. What is your comment on this speech?
For any observer, it was clear that there is some differences between the two factions, or between the Sudanese military and the rapid support forces. But previously, these differences are not at the surface. But now, after the speech of Al-Burhan, General Al-Burhan and Hemeti, it's clear that these differences are now came to the surface. Yeah. And this puts the country at a big risk at this time, because any clash between these two groups would mean that the country will slide into a civil war that may not end soon. And this is something that must be controlled. But we as civilians in FFC, we don't support any of these groups, and we don't think that we have we are closer to Hemeti than Burhan. No, we look at them as a military bloc, that they should solve their differences.
One bloc.
Yes, they should solve their differences. Both of them have signed the framework agreement, and they pledged to go and go out of the political process. So this is our end relation with them. But for the observer, they must understand that we are with same distance between Hemeti and Al-Burhan. But when you look at this situation, it is very dangerous, because the rapid forces, the rapid support forces, they are huge in number. There are still no exact numbers, but during this transitional period, there was a continuous process of recruiting additional elements, and I think there is these two components are somewhat, in terms of numbers, they are almost similar in size. So any clash between these two, it means that yes, the devastation of Sudan. At the same time, we need, because these are the legacies of the defunct regime, there is no reason to form some other forces while you have a national army. But this came as a fact now. We want to manage this situation as a fact, because this is what we inherited from the defunct regime. And until we reach a national and one unified national army, and this process It's not easy, but at last we must be sure that the rapid support forces and those factions who signed the peace agreement and the national army to form one unified national army so that it reflects the all components of Sudan, because we can see also many parts of Sudan, they look at the national army as having a concentration of certain parts of Sudan, and this also is harmful to the Sudanese unity. While, for example, the rapid support forces, they recruited almost in a way of a balance from all the social components of Sudan. So this is also a very important remark. So when we come to the national formation of the new national army, we want a balanced national army that everybody from Sudan, from the parts of Sudan, from the east, from the west, they find themselves in this national army so that they don't need to go to militias, or they don't go to wars. So this is something that we need. But at last, I think they are the international interventions. I hope that they are not international hands in also I hope that there are no international hands behind also this escalation of the differences between these two groups. So what we need is wisdom. My message to them is that this country is not able, or I hope that there are no international hands behind also this escalation of the differences between these two groups. So what we need is wisdom. My message to them is that this country is not able, or has no chance to go any step further, because we approach the edge and we are about to collapse. The citizens are suffering, and this political process has been delayed many times, so there's no time for any additional tactics or personal interests. The country should be, from now on, be governed by a civil government, so that we end this vicious circle of our political problem.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, well, Professor, what can you add? Because you touched something which is actually my third question, the involvement of the international or the outside, the external forces, especially the countries. I'm not talking about the organization, unity, the trilateral. I have no objection, because it's something we are part of it. We are members, whether in United Nations, whether in IGAD, or whether in AU. This is not. But the problem is about the quadruple, the mechanism, the other mechanism. People now are a little bit worried about the involvement, because they are trying to tie between Hamiti response to every speech by Burhan. He immediately followed by the speech from Hamiti, which is contradicting what he said, especially after twice. It happened first when he went to Chad, and recently this speech immediately after coming from Emirates, maybe. So some people, they are afraid of what Dr. Halim is saying, that any external element, definitely it will lead if the gap is widening by pulling of external element. This is something dangerous.
Well, I think absolutely, because these countries are not charities. They have their own interests, and we should not really expect a lot of good things coming from the international community. Of course, the international community plays very positive role. They are behind the trilateral. They are supporting the process that is going on. And the Quad was also seemingly very supportive of the thing. But of course, you have individual countries, and they have their own interests they would pursue, and if their interests are seen as being served by siding with one of the components, they would do that. There's no question about that. So there is always a risk of negative alignments, of negative interventions that amplify the differences between the rapid support forces and the Sudanese army. And I think the leaders of these two forces should be aware of this, and they should also have a sense of responsibility that would guard against, falling into this kind of trap that is quite destructive for the country. I think also as civilians, or at least the political actors, FFC1 and those who are part of the political process, they also need to be aware of this. They need to do their best so that they make the utmost positive things out of what the international community is doing or what the countries are doing. We have in the neighborhood, we have Egypt, we have Ethiopia, and from a distant far, we have the Saudi Arabia and we have the UAE. These were the key actors in the immediate region that affect positively or negatively what happens in the country. Of course, we also have Chad and the Southern African Republic, and what happens there affects us also, and it goes both directions, positively and negatively. And all these things need to be understood by all the political leaders, including the military leaders. They have to be aware of this, and they have to put the national interest as a first priority. Unfortunately, much of what is happening, within the Sudanese political context, either in the military front or the civilian front, isn't really cognizant of the importance of putting the national interest first. Some of the political differences between the civilian political actors are not objective at all. They are about personality issues, they are about egos, they are about, not really taking seriously the national interest of this country and its people. And I think this is something that everybody needs to take into consideration.
So you think that's something, it is serious, any confrontation among what's happening in the West, especially in Chad, Central Africa, things are not stable.
It will have implications on us.
It will have
implications. And if you go a bit in history, I was in high school when we had the Chad and Libyan war in Darfur, and the influx of people, of weapons, had direct implications on what happened a few years later. We had the armed robbery that started in Darfur. It was a remnant of what was happening between Chad and Libya. The Chadian, war, the Chadian rebels against the government of Hussein Habri. Darfur was the battleground, and all these have implications on the region. So anything happens in Chad or in Kar would definitely affect Sudan. There's no question about this.
It will affect Sudan.
Absolutely.
So you believe that the two leaders, now we have people are afraid of the two top leaders, those who have guns. You are saying that I'm not worried about the civilian.
No.
Civilians
don't have guns.
Because they don't have guns.
No.
It's just rhetoric.
They only have teeth, but you have people with guns, and that's quite serious.
That's very dangerous.
Yeah.
Which might lead to international intervention, or exactly what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq, or.
Let us hope that we will not get there.
We hope.
And one of the things that makes me all the time look at the half full part of the cup is that we have our own wisdom that guard us, against slipping into the cliff.
We hope so.
Yeah,
we hope.
I am optimistic.
You are optimistic. Very good. Okay, here's something. I think we are all optimistic. We hope that things always it reaches the brink of the whole of the abyss, and
Something
maybe
happens.
by God's help us, because people are they don't deserve actually being put in a situation where there is no governance, where there is chaos. People of Sudan, I'm very proud, they are different than any other nation anyhow. let us move to about to the also other controversial issue, which is also part of the tug of war between the countries around us, not between us. The workshop which was held in, this is for both of you, which was held in Cairo. It is clearly, do you think it did something positive to the process? Let us be frank. And why actually the outcome of the workshops of the Cairo, sometimes it's difficult to, they are talking about 30 months of transitional period, they are talking about 7 regional assembly, general assemblies, 7 governments. They are talking about details which not yet reached. As they always say, the people say, let us cross the bridge when we come to it. So it seems that they crossed the bridge before coming to it. So just tell us, and also Professor Manzoor will tell us about your own personal feeling about the workshop, what was done in Cairo as something parallel to the framework agreement. Bearing in mind that Professor Manzoor said he hopes that external forces will not take advantage by leaning to this side or that side, because it will aggravate the situation in the country. Just give me your feeling about what you heard and what is the outcome of the Cairo workshops of the democratic bloc.
It is usually logical that any country will be very concerned with the neighboring countries, with which, especially with which they have direct, they share same borders. In the case of Egypt and Ethiopia and these neighboring countries, we have historical ties with them, and we know also that we have some shared social and relations, and we have also marriages between the two countries. We have shared tribes, and we think that Egypt historically played the most influential role in Sudanese politics.
Yes.
And we have seen recently a growing trend, especially among the youth, against the role of Egypt in Sudan. And this is also something that is fact. The Egyptian leaders, they know about this. And but let us return to your question and about this period and after the throw of the defunct regime. Egypt's role after, we also remember that Jafar al-Marghani, for example, at the late days of Umar al-Bashir, and because they are pro the Egyptians, there was an advice from the Egyptians to share and be part of the Umar al-Bashir's regime. This is also is not a clever evaluation of the political situation in Sudan. And after they shared and they became part of Umar al-Bashir, Umar al-Bashir was thrown by a public uprising. This is one. After the revolution, we as Sudanese, we expect from Egypt to play a more positive role, and we have seen how the role of the Ethiopians surpassed the role of the Egyptians, and this is something historically didn't happen. And also during the signing of the ceremony, we have seen how the crowds or the attendants, how they welcomed Abiy Ahmed at that ceremony. All these issues also, these are some remarks. In addition, when the Quads, when they signed this group, Egypt was not part of them. This is also raised a question. I think the Cairo workshop is something that the Egyptians, they want to correct their position regarding their role in the political process, the current political process. I think so. But I think the right way, instead of forming other for
Forum.
example, forums, they should either support the framework agreement or be part of the Quads. This is maybe better, but bringing those people, because there were 3 blocs who participated in Cairo workshop, the national accords and the national compromise and the national bloc. These are the 3. Most of these, they are part of the previous regime, especially the national accord and the national compromise.
They were part of the Western regime.
Yes, the previous regime. And the national bloc now, they supported the coup. And the coup have restored the elements of the previous regime. So the Sudanese people looked at those who participated in Cairo workshop as against their aspirations and against their revolution. This is so. And it is clear that even after the workshop, where are the results? There's nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, they said that they will form a national front and they will form a government. Because all these things, all these trials, they failed once and twice because unless you have genuine and adequate and real public support, you cannot translate anything into reality, especially politics. So I think the Cairo workshop was an attempt from our brothers in Egypt, who I think they are very important for us, but our relations should be based on a new equation, because history cannot repeat itself. Because if history repeats itself, there's no development. I think the Sudanese political equation have changed completely, and the variables that we now have in the equation are different. So I want our Egyptian brothers to be part of any effort that helps us to restore the transition to democracy, but not by returning elements of the previous regime.
That's very clear.
Yes.
Very clear. Professor, yes, about Cairo workshop.
I think I cannot agree more with Dr. Abdul Halim because he said all things that I wanted to say, but I just want to be more explicit than him.
Okay.
He is a bit polite. You know, yes, absolutely. We cannot deny the historical ties between Sudan and Egypt. Nobody can deny this. But unfortunately, Egypt has been looking at Sudan as its backyard. They don't take Sudan seriously. They didn't take what happened seriously. They were still in the old mentality, and that's not going to work. Now, one of the surprising things was that Egypt was the first country to support the signing of the framework agreement on 5th of December last year. Egypt was the first country to support the beginning or the inauguration of the final stage of the political process. I was following this. Egypt was, with Saudi Arabia, issued a statement saying that they were supportive of the political framework agreement. And for this reason, I was really surprised to see Egypt organizing the workshop in Cairo. Because as Halim was saying, if you want to contribute positively, why don't you support a process that's already going on? A process that you already supported. You issued a statement.
Yes.
Twice. Egypt issued a statement twice, on the 5th of December and on the 8th of January, supporting the process. And when Sami Shukri went to Saudi Arabia, he and the Saudi foreign minister issued a joint statement supporting this political framework. So one cannot understand, after all these statements and supporting, and by the way, the Egyptian ambassador was queuing with the Arab ambassadors on the 8th of January to support this political process. I was there in the Friendship Hall. I attended this. So you don't understand why this is happening.
What happened there?
And for this reason, because this is going against the aspirations of people, the outcome is a big fat zero. I really don't see an outcome. And we have seen this, different formations, these democratic, with all due respect to them, they have been forming all sorts of different things. Way back from FFC2, At-Taibajit, where are they? Because they don't have support.
Yes, they don't have support. Yes.
And let us say that what we have now, this political framework, it is not complete, it's not perfect, but it is the only viable thing that's on the table. It is a process, it's a dynamic that, you know, creates some sort of a movement in this otherwise transitional stalemate.
Yes.
So I have, and I think this is also something we have discussed here many times, that there is something positive going on. There is a commotion that was created. There is a support that's coming from the international community, represented by the trilateral, by the Quad. We have very important political actors who signed to this, the FFC one, the military. This is a process, you know. And we need to really build or at least strengthen the momentum so that we move forward with the transition. So, but to answer your question in a very clear way, I don't think the Cairo workshop came out with any credible outcome.
So it will, okay. Now we have about 5 minutes and we have our last question, which is very important, also related to this situation in the country. The suspension of Sudan membership in the African Union. Last week, the summit of the African Union was held, and although Sudan did a lot of effort before the convening of this summit, the African summit, to do something about the neighboring countries, the African countries, to do something about reinstating Sudan membership as a full member, but it seems that it didn't work and it failed. What is your comment on this? Both of you, because we have 2 minutes for everyone. We have 4 minutes.
It should be clear to Sudan that according to the Lomé agreement in 2000, the agreement was very clear about any country that goes into a military coup. So we don't expect any results. And anybody who thinks that he will bring some kind of consent or will change the agreement or the outcomes is just deceiving himself. So I don't think Sudan can restore his membership. But this is not the loss we had because of this coup. We lost the Paris conference pledges and support for Sudan.
Yes.
We lost the chance of debt relief of $50 billion. We lost the chance of receiving and international aid and regaining our cooperation with international financial institutions.
That's a real loss.
A big loss. Sudan has lost a lot in this year and 3 months time of the coup. By the way, we have a lot of distractions that happened and chances that we missed because of this coup. So what Sudan needs is not only to be keen about returning his membership, but to look at the big picture and try to end this political chaos and return to transitional path. And the military should go to the barracks, and we should form a civilian government and try to restore our membership with the international organizations, and so that we can solve this problem, economic problem, and address issues of daily living for our nation.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'm really surprised that they disregard the actual and serious homework in the country, and they are running to get their membership restored. You know, this is just nonsense. You know? we have more serious things here to attend to, and I think if they do their homework internally, that one automatically will come.
It will.
Of course, because as Halim said in the African Charter, it was very clear. Any government that comes through unconstitutional means, it would be dismembered from the AU. So
no need to go.
They shouldn't expect something different. There's no need actually.
Okay, one very last question for 1 minute because already run of time. Do you prefer a traditional government, non-partisan, not necessarily technocrat, non-partisan, or with the addition of some parties?
Well, my personal preference, non-partisan.
Non-partisan. You, Dr. Halim?
Because
Non-partisan or no?
no, I don't think that there is clear cut because most of the Sudanese we have our historical affiliations in, for example, for different parties, but it is very difficult to select neutral people in Sudan. But still, I think parties should not participate in the fashion of quotas. Anybody who will be selected should be selected in his personal capacity. I don't think that this time parties should participate in terms of division of power. And this will be another mistake that will endanger the coming transitional periods.
So that's why it's better to have
this something
non-affiliated, not partisan. It's better.
I think this is something that should be given to the coming prime minister. He should have his, the full power to form his own cabinet.
Okay.
And the political parties should be satisfied with
Whoever comes.
yes,
Whoever comes.
yeah, with returning the country to the transitional period and bringing the prime minister, and then give him the power to form his government by selecting a council of Sudanese experts or figures.
Thank you, dear guest, Professor Manzoor Abdullah Manzoor. Thank you very much for having you with us. Thank you, Dr. Halim. Abdul Halim Teman, very rich and strong and good and hot episode. Thank you, dear viewers, for being with us in the last hour. We hope to see you next week in another issue of Dialogue Horizon. Bye.